एवरीवन, वेलकम है आज के इस पार्ट सेकंड बायोडाइवर्सिटी कंजर्वेशन में आप सबका। तो आज स्टार्ट करते हैं हम लोग। वी विल टेक अप द ए.बी. हम्बोल्ट्स ऑब्जर्वेशन से हम स्टार्ट करेंगे। ए.बी. हम्बोल्ट, ही हैज़ एनालाइज्ड द एरिया ऑफ साउथ अमेरिकन फॉरेस्ट and his observation was, as we increase the area, species richness will increase, but that increase in species richness will be only up to a limit. So A.B. Humboldt, he has extensively studied the species richness and area relationship in South American forest. So उनकी ऑब्जर्वेशन ये थी कि एरिया जैसे बढ़ेगा तो स्पीसी रिचनेस तो बढ़ेगी, लेकिन ओनली अप टू अ सर्टेन लिमिट. So that was the observation of A.B. Humboldt. This was experimental observation. Through his experiments in the forests, he has seen. So हम एक एरिया प्लॉट करते हैं. एक मान लो इस एरिया में there are 10 species. As area increases, as you can see in this diagram, the number of species increase कर रहा है 10 to 14, 14 to 20 and so on. So if you can plot a graph by taking this experimental data between area and species richness, तो जो ग्राफ हमारे पास आएगा, that graph will be like this. इस तरह का ग्राफ हमारे पास आएगा. You can see the NCERT diagram graph which is given in NCERT also. So this graph, ये जो ग्राफ है ये अपीयर होता है, कैसे अपीयर होता है? ये रेक्टेंगुलर हाइपरबोला. This graph will be a rectangular hyperbola and S is directly proportional. S stands for species richness, AZ, और S को हम is equal to CAZ. अगर इस ग्राफ को if we turn into the log scale में टर्न करेंगे तो हमारे पास ये ग्राफ आ जाएगा log S is equal to log C plus Z log A. Log C plus Z log A. So log C will be the y-intercept, Z will be the slope of line, or Z is also known as the regression coefficient. log C की वैल्यू y-intercept से मिल जाएगी हमें, Z जो है slope of the line है, और इसी को regression coefficient हम बोल रहे हैं. ये लाइन जहाँ पे इंटरसेप्ट करेगी log C की वैल्यू आ जाएगी. ये हमारे पास स्लोप को हम फाइंड आउट कर लेंगे. वैल्यू ऑफ जेड हमारे पास यहाँ पे आ जाएगी. रिग्रेशन कोफिशिएंट की वैल्यू भी हमारे पास आ जाएगी. Okay, so value of the Z, it is given in NCERT that it is 0.1 to 0.2 and it is not dependent on the area and also not dependent on the taxonomical group. Value of Z 0.1 से 0.2 के बीच में वेरी करेगी. एरिया इंडिपेंडेंट है ये, टैक्सोनॉमिकल ग्रुप इंडिपेंडेंट है ये. Irrespective of taxonomic group, value will be 0.1 to 0.2. Whether we can say that plants in Britain or mollusks in USA, irrespective of that, this value of Z will be between 0.1 to 0.2. Now, for some taxonomical groups, value of Z is higher than the normal value. Z की वैल्यू 0.1 to 0.2 से ज़्यादा होगी for some taxonomical group. And its value higher means it will be 0.6 to 1.2. 0.6 to 1.2 for which groups? For mammals, fruit-eating birds, and angiosperms. वैल्यू विल बी हायर मैमल्स के लिए, फ्रूट ईटिंग बर्ड्स के लिए और एंजियोस्पर्म्स के लिए. दिस वैल्यू विल बी हायर. Similarly, for large continent, if we are taking this value of Z, then for large continent, this value of Z will also be higher. That is 0.6 to 1.2. That value will be higher. Now, the next will take up the what is the importance of biodiversity. Biodiversity हमारे लिए इकोसिस्टम के लिए कैसे इम्पॉर्टेंट है. So, if total ant species are 20,000, this question has been given in NCERT, and if 15,000 got extinct, then how does it affect you? अगर 15,000 एक्सटिंक्ट हो जाती हैं एंट स्पीसीज तो हमें कैसे इम्पैक्ट करेंगी. In order to find out the answer of this question, we will study a hypothesis which is given by Paul Ehrlich. इस क्वेश्चन का आंसर हमारे पास इनडायरेक्ट वे में आएगा. और कैसे आंसर आएगा? We will take this answer, we will understand the answer of this question by the Ribbett-Popper hypothesis of Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich की Ribbett-Popper hypothesis से हम इस क्वेश्चन का आंसर समझेंगे. So, what is this Ribbett-Popper hypothesis? Let's try to understand. Paul Ehrlich की इस hypothesis को समझते हैं. So, Paul Ehrlich ने जो Ribbett-Popper hypothesis दी, this hypothesis can be explained by analogy method. इसको हम analogy से, example से समझते हैं. So, the airplane को हम कंसिडर करते हैं. एयरप्लेन एक इकोसिस्टम की तरह है. If we assume, और इसमें जो पैसेंजर which are sitting, they are taking the rivets, that is popping of rivets. We can compare it with extension of species. Extension of species. वो लेकर के जा रहे हैं. जो पैसेंजर कभी कभी क्या करते हैं, पॉपिंग करते हैं रिवेट्स की. Then what will happen if this process will be repeated again and again? Then the wings जो होंगे वो रिमूव हो जाएंगे. अगर विंग्स रिमूव होते हैं तो we can say that there is keystone species extinct हो गई है. There is extinction of keystone species. And stability of the airplane क्या हो जाएगी? That will become weak. Stability of airplane weak हो जाएगी. इसको हम कंपेयर कर सकते हैं किससे? Stability of ecosystem. Stability of ecosystem will be compromised. And here keystone extension, keystone species से हमारा मतलब क्या हुआ? Keystone species is that species which is important provider of shelter and habitat for other species. उसको हम कहेंगे keystone species. So this was the Paul Ehrlich hypothesis, and he said that the keystone species extinction के कारण क्या होगा? Stability of the ecosystem जो होगी, that will be disturbed. That will be disturbed. So according to this hypothesis, we can summarize that passenger of airplane while traveling back take home some parts. Take home some parts means popping of rabbits. Initially, not much impact. Initially, not much impact, but ultimately airplane get weak. Initially not much impact, but ultimately airplane get weak. Slowly the aeroplane की जो safety होगी, structure जो होगा कमजोर हो जाएगा. And when the important part like wings की popping हो जाएगी, so that will lead towards the extension of the keystone and the instability of the system. Now next we will take up the one more experiment, that is the external plot experiment. External plot experiment. This was given by David Tillman. डेविड टिलमैन ने ये एक्सटर्नल प्लॉट एक्सपेरिमेंट दिया. विल टेक अप दिस एरिया ए. In this area A, there are 50 species, and annual productivity in 2007 of this area A, the annual productivity was, we can assume, this value comes through the experiments. So the value in 2017 annual productivity was 100, 2017. In 2018, the annual productivity was 105. 2019 annual productivity was 102, और 2020 में annual productivity थी 100. This is the data which we are getting. In this is habitat B. In habitat B, suppose there are 10 species are there, so we'll take up here also through experimental data. एनुअल प्रोडक्टिविटी 2017 में हमारे पास आई 120, 2018 में हमारे पास आई मान लो 60, देन इन 2019 70, and in 2020 40. So what is the difference in area A, area B? So area with more number of species, that is plot A, that is going to show least variation in annual productivity. If the species number is more, biodiversity is more, then there will be least variation in annual productivity. Annual productivity में variation क्या होगा? Least होगा. So next we'll take up. It means in importance of biodiversity, can we say that more biodiversity is more, there will be more stability. More biodiversity will lead to more stability in terms of, more stability होगी किस term में होगी more stability? In terms of any alien species if enters into the ecosystem, which ecosystem is having more biodiversity, then there will be more resistance to that alien species. अगर कोई alien species एक stable ecosystem enter करती है तो उसका जो resistance होगा उस system में वो बहुत ज़्यादा होगा. So alien species का invasion ऐसे system में आसानी से नहीं हो पाएगा. So more stable ecosystem, we can say that will show more resistance to the alien species, and it is a good thing. ये अच्छी चीज़ है. More biodiversity का मतलब more stability. Second, in terms of ecosystem with more biodiversity is resilient to internal disturbances. Ecosystem with more species, more variation in species will be resilient to any internal disturbances. So it means if the more biodiversity is there, it means system will be more stable. It means there will be less internal disturbances होंगी उस system के अंदर. That is also important. And then third one, we can talk that more biodiversity, if the system is having more biodiversity, that will give that will give or that will have stable productivity. Productivity of that ecosystem will be stable. Stable productivity, वेरिएशन नहीं होगा उसमें. Now the next will take up the loss in biodiversity. Biodiversity में जो loss हो रहा है, if we take up in recent times, there is no evidence of evolution of species. Evolution of species का कोई evidence नहीं है. But there are evidences of extinction of species. Species के extinction के evidences हमारे पास हैं. For example, what are those evidences of extinction of species? We can say 2000 species of birds, 2000 species of birds got extinct when human inhabited Pacific Island. जब ह्यूमन बीइंग की इनहेबिटेशन हुई पैसिफिक आइलैंड में, बिकॉज ऑफ दैट 2000 bird species they got extinct. Then according to IUCN Red data list 2004, if we take up this list, then 784 species extinction has been reported. Now out of these 784 species got extinct, out of these species 359 were invertebrate, 338 were vertebrates, and 87 were plants. 87 were plants. Then the extinct species which got extinct, they were the Wally, Jaman and Caspian. They are the tiger subspecies which is extinct now. Bali, Javan, Caspian. Tiger subspecies got extinct. Dodo, that flightless bird, got extinct from Mauritius. Then quagga got extinct from Africa. Dodo, flightless bird, got extinct from Mauritius. क्वेगा एक्सटेंशन हुआ अफ्रीका से. थाइलेसिन का एक्सटेंशन हुआ ऑस्ट्रेलिया से. थाइलेसिन गॉट एक्सटिंक्ट फ्रॉम ऑस्ट्रेलिया. थाइलेसिन ऑस्ट्रेलिया. देन स्टीलर सी कॉ गॉट एक्सटिंक्ट फ्रॉम रशिया. स्टीलर सी कॉ का एक्सटेंशन हुआ रशिया से. रशिया. स्टीलर सी कॉ, इट इज द लार्ज एक्वेटिक मैमल था. लार्ज एक्वेटिक मैमल. देन पैसेंजर पिजन. So if we assess the threat of extinction, then 15,500 species are facing the threat of extinction now. Out of these 15,500 species which are facing the threat of extinction, out of them the 12% they are bird species, 23% mammal species, 23% mammals, 31% gymnosperms. 31% they are gymnosperms. 32% they are amphibians. Why 32%? Such a huge number of amphibians are facing threat of extinction. Why 32%? The reason is freshwater resources are now polluted because of the increase in population. And we know that the amphibians, they are gonna present in freshwater only, so less freshwater resources available, more extinction of amphibian species we can see because of this. So in order to protect the amphibian species, we need to protect the freshwater resources. So in a summary, we can say that out of 15,500, more than 650 are from India. So you can calculate the percentage wise. 650 species which got extinct, they were from India. Now we will take up some categories which is given in IUCN Red data list. What are those categories? Some important categories which we need to understand. Extinct species, and then extinct in wild. Extinct in wild means the species is not present in wild, but maybe domestic areas may be present, but number will be very, very less. Then critically endangered species, third category, critically endangered. Then fourth category will be endangered species, endangered. Then threatened category, threatened or vulnerable species. The population is increasing. थ्रेटेंड, थ्रेट है उनको एक्सटेंशन का. सिक्स्थ कैटेगरी इज लोअर रिस्क कैटेगरी, lower risk category. And seventh is data not evaluated. There is no evaluation of the data, so data not evaluated. Data not evaluated. These are the 7 major categories: extinct, extinct and wild, critically endangered, endangered, then threatened, lower risk, and data not evaluated. Now, what is the rate of extinction which we are talking about, that species are getting extinct? So what is the rate of extinction? Extinction का rate क्या है? आइए हम इसकी बात करते हैं, rate of extinction की. So on our earth के ऊपर there were 5 major episodes of mass extinction. There were 5 major episodes of mass extinction. And the previous extinctions which were there on earth, they were not due to the human activities. We should keep this in mind, that these 5 major episodes, they were not due to the human activities. But the 6th episode of mass extinction, 6th episode of mass extinction, this 6th episode of mass extinction is 100 to 1000 times faster than the previous extinction rates, episodes. लेकिन जो 6th एपिसोड है मास एक्सटेंशन का, ये एपिसोड हम ये कह रहे हैं, दिस एपिसोड इज 100 to 1000 टाइम्स फास्टर है जो ये 5 एपिसोड हो चुके हैं जो एक्सटेंशन के, उनके मुकाबले में इसका रेट जो है दैट इज फास्ट, 100 to 1000 टाइम्स फास्टर, 100 to 1000 times faster. So if we calculate this speed, we are saying that it is 100 to 1000 times faster as compared to the previous episodes. So with this rate, we can lose our 50% biodiversity in coming 100 years. In coming 100 years we can lose 50% बायोडाइवर्सिटी को हम लूज कर देंगे इन नेक्स्ट 100 years, अगर ये एपिसोड 6th एपिसोड एक्सटेंशन का ऐसे ही चलता है तो. So you can imagine after 100 years what will be the position of our ecosystem. हमारे ecosystem की position क्या होगी, we can very well imagine. Okay, we can lose 50% of biodiversity in next 100 years में हम lose कर देंगे. So many of these species जो होंगी हमारे पास extinct हो जाएंगी. Now when we talk about so it means extinction will take place, and what will be the impact of this extinction, क्या impact होगा. So first there will be decrease in productivity of the ecosystem. Then due to this extinction there will be disturbances in the various ecological processes like the water cycle, oxygen cycle, all biogeochemical cycles, they will be disturbed because of the extinction. Because each and every species is having its unique role in ecosystem. Then due to the extinction there will be the invasion of alien species in the local ecosystem, and as a result the alien species will have very devastating impact on the local flora and fauna. Then the stability will decrease, stability of the ecosystem, that will decrease. What are the reasons now biodiversity loss is taking place? Why is it happening? What are the reasons for the loss of biodiversity? In our NCERT it is given in the form of evil quartet. Evil quartet की form में इसको दे रखा है. So let's talk about these 4 major reasons for the loss of biodiversity. So first we'll talk about habitat loss and fragmentation. First evil quadrant, habitat loss and fragmentation, and this is the most important reason for the loss in biodiversity. सबसे ज़्यादा important factor है ये. So the forests are being cleaned up for agriculture and other purposes. When the forests are being cleaned, because human population is increasing, so there is more demand, we are more dependent on forests, we are exploiting them like anything. So surely there will be habitat loss, surely there will be man and wild conflict, because the animals, they were living in those forests for many years, and we have invaded as a human being, we have destroyed their habitat, and as a result if they don't have the habitat to live, surely there will be loss of biodiversity. If we take up a case study of Amazon forests which were known as the lungs of earth because of their huge productivity. Amazon rainforests, they were having initially 14% area. They were occupying 14% area of total land. Now 14% occupancy of Amazon rainforest, now it has come down to 6%. Amazon rainforest का अब जो land area है वो 14% से रह गया है 6%. Why? Reason is for soybean cultivation, the area is being cleared up. For fodder, for getting beef cattle के लिए, fodder के लिए area को use किया गया, exploit किया गया. सोयाबीन कल्टीवेशन के लिए हमने उस एरिया को काटा, फॉरेस्ट को काटा है. ड्यू टू दैट द अमेजॉन रेन फॉरेस्ट 14% से 6% कवरेज उनकी आ गई है. सो हैबिटेट लॉस हुआ है. दैट इज़ वेरी प्रोमिनेंट एंड दैट इज़ द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट रीजन फॉर द लॉस ऑफ बायोडाइवर्सिटी. Then habitat loss, and second factor is fragmentation. What is fragmentation? Fragmentation here, if this is a large forest area and if we are removing these patches of forests, this is a large forest area, boundary of the forest, और ये पैच एरियाज जो हैं, ट्रीज हैज़ बीन रिमूव्ड फ्रॉम दिस फॉरेस्ट, तो क्या होगा, ये जो हैबिटेट है ये छोटे छोटे पार्ट्स में डिवाइड हो जाएगी. दीज पैचेस रिमूवल दे मे बी ड्यू टू द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंटल ह्यूमन एक्टिविटीज़ के कारण हो सकता है. सो द पैचेस मीन द ट्रीज आर रिमूव्ड, सो एंटायर फॉरेस्ट इन दैट एरिया विल बी लॉस्ट. और इस तरह की फ्रेगमेंटेशन से क्या होगा, हैबिटेट जो है छोटी हो जाएगी एंड मेन लॉस टू द लार्ज साइज मैमल्स, बर्ड्स, माइग्रेटरी एनिमल्स के लिए ये प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगी बिकॉज देयर हैबिटेट उनकी छोटी हो जाएगी. देयर हैबिटेट विल श्रिंक इनटू स्मॉल एरियाज और देयर विल बी इंटरफेरेंस in their habitat. So because of the fragmentation, the large size mammals, birds and migratory animals, they will not get the sufficient habitat to survive. So fragmentation is also an important factor. Then we'll talk about the second factor. We'll talk about the overexploitation. There is a very thin line difference between needs and greeds. Nature has given us sufficient resources to satisfy our needs, but not the greeds. So some animals are being overexploited because of human greeds, and because of the overexploitation they got extinct. ये animals extinct हो गए हैं because of the overexploitation. So whenever overexploitation of any species will take place, it will be difficult for that species to survive. For example, Steller sea cow got extinct because of overexploitation. Steller sea cow and passenger pigeon, they got extinct because of overexploitation. Passenger pigeon का भी extinction हुआ है ऐसे ही. Marine fish, many marine fishes, they are overcaptured, and as a result of that they also become extinct in nature. This is very sad because overexploitation has caused loss of biodiversity. Third factor, we'll talk about the alien species invasion. Alien species invasion. If any alien species enter into a new habitat, its number will increase exponentially, and that will cause extinction to the local species, endemic species of that area, because these species, they will not have any natural predator. Example, we can take up Parthenium bead, Lantana bead, then Nile perch. It was the fish which was introduced to Lake Victoria, and because of overfeeding of this Nile perch fish, it has caused extinction of 200 cichlid fish of that area. So alien species, because their exponential growth, because they do not have any natural predator in the ecosystem, when their population will increase beyond a certain limit, obviously the local species will suffer. Next example, invasion species का हम देख सकते हैं African catfish, Clarias garipinus. African catfish Clarias garipinus का एग्जाम्पल दे सकते हैं हम लोग. This African catfish Clarias garipinus introduced into Indian water illegally. After the introduction, because of its growth बहुत fast थी, illegally it was introduced into the Indian Ocean, and इस species ने क्या किया, compete किया इंडियन कैटफिश के साथ और इंडियन कैटफिश को एक्सटेंड कर दिया, बिकॉज एज वी सेड क्लेरियास गैरीपाइनस का नेचुरल प्रेडेटर नहीं होगा और रेट जो होता है इनका मल्टीप्लिकेशन का बहुत ही फास्ट होगा. सो इट हैज़ कॉज्ड अ थ्रेट टू द इंडियन कैटफिश को उसने थ्रेट कर दिया अफ्रीकन कैटफिश क्लेरियास गैरीपाइनस ने. So these were the few examples, case studies of the invasion of the local species and the impact on our biodiversity. Fourth factor of evil quadrate का है co-extinction. Co-extinction means here, what is the meaning of co-extinction? If two species, they are dependent on each other and extinction of the one species lead to the extinction of the other species. That is the meaning of co-extinction. अगर दो species dependent हैं एक दूसरे के ऊपर, एक का extinct हो जाती है, दूसरी भी extinct हो सकती है. So we'll take up the examples of co-extinction. फर्स्ट एग्जाम्पल लाइकेंस. वी नो दैट लाइकेंस में एल्गी और फंजाई की सिम्बायोटिक एसोसिएशन होती है जिसको कि म्यूचुअलिज्म हम कहते हैं. इफ़ एनी वन ऑफ देम विल बिकम एक्सटिंक्ट देन द सेकंड स्पीसीज विल आल्सो बिकम एक्सटिंक्ट. सेकंड एग्जाम्पल समझते हैं हम लोग पॉलिनेटर और प्लांट्स का. इफ़ पॉलिनेटर विल बिकम एक्सटिंक्ट, प्लांट में पॉलिनेशन नहीं हो पाएगी. सिमिलरली प्लांट एक्सटिंक्ट हो जाता है तो पॉलिनेटर जो है वो सर्वाइव नहीं कर पाएगी, लाइफ साइकिल कंप्लीट नहीं कर पाएगी. वास्प एंड फिग दे आर ऑल्सो इंटरडिपेंडेंट. लाइफ साइकिल दोनों का एक दूसरे के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट है. सो इफ एनी ऑफ द स्पीसीज विल बिकम एक्सटिंक्ट देन को एक्सटिंक्शन कैन टेक प्लेस. वन मोर थिंग वी वांट टू मेंशन हियर दैट ऑब्लिगेट पैरासिटिज्म. ऑब्लिगेट पैरासाइट्स के केस में इफ होस्ट एक्सटिंक्ट होता है देन पैरासाइट ऑल्सो गॉट एक्सटिंक्ट. Extinction of host will lead to the extinction of the parasite because it is obligate parasitism, both are dependent. क्योंकि पैरासाइट जो है वो डिपेंडेंट है होस्ट के ऊपर. सो इफ अगर होस्ट एक्सटिंक्ट हो जाएगा तो पैरासाइट सर्वाइव नहीं कर सकता है. इफ को एवोल्यूशन हैड अकर्ड देन ओनली co-extinction occur. अगर if co-evolution had occurred, then only co-extinction occur. अगर species का co-evolution हुआ होगा तभी co-extinction होगा species का. This is very very important point and at certain reasons में we will get this question. ठीक है, को एक्सटेंशन कब होगा? अगर स्पीसीज का को एवोल्यूशन होगा तभी को एक्सटेंशन हो सकता है. दिस इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन दैट व्हाई वी नीड टू कंजर्व बायोडाइवर्सिटी. बायोडाइवर्सिटी को कंजर्व करने की आखिर नीड क्या है? व्हाट इज़ द नीड? यू कैन थिंक ऑन दिस क्वेश्चन. सो आंसर वी कैन गिव दैट देयर आर 3 रीजन्स फॉर कंजर्विंग द बायोडाइवर्सिटी. फर्स्ट इज़ नैरो यूटिलिटेरियन, जिसमें कि हम बात कर सकते हैं डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट्स की. द डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट्स विच वी आर गेटिंग फ्रॉम इकोसिस्टम, द डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट्स विच वी आर गेटिंग फ्रॉम आवर नेचर. सेकेंड, वी कैन टॉक अबाउट द ब्रॉड यूटिलिटेरियंस, that is the indirect benefits which we are getting from the ecosystem in various forms, in various sort of the services which we are getting from the ecosystem. So we can call them as indirect benefits which we are getting from the ecosystem. And third reason could be the ethical reasons. For the ethical reasons, we need to protect these species. So one by one we will discuss these reasons. So first we will take up the narrow utilitarian, means the direct benefits which we are getting from the biodiversity. So direct benefits, when we think about the direct benefits, n number of things are coming in our mind. So biodiversity, what we are getting from the biodiversity? Dear friends, we are getting food, different sort of food from plants, fruits, vegetables, pulses, cereals, and what not. Without plants, without biodiversity, our life we cannot survive because we will not get any food. Fiber, timber, then products for in various industries like rubber, like lubricants, perfume, all we are getting from the ecosystem, all we are getting from the plants and animals. So these are the direct benefits which we are getting: food, fiber, timber, and various sort of products. And those products, they are having very huge economic value. Then 25% drugs are directly obtained from plants, various sort of drugs. You can name many drugs. For example, Texas Bacata, anti-cancerous drugs, we are getting from that. Raw Wolfia vomitoria, blood pressure, BP control medicines we are getting from the plants. So 25% drugs we are obtaining from plants. 25,000 plant species are used as a traditional medicine in various pathies, in be it Ayurveda, be it Unani, in different pathies में हम use कर रहे हैं 25,000 plant species को. Okay, next we'll take up this bioprospecting. This is what is bioprospecting? You may find this term in your NCERT. Bioprospecting means it is exploring the molecular, genetic, and species level diversity for economic value. When we explore the molecular, genetic, and species level biodiversity, so as to use it further for improving the quality of life or for improving the standard of life. So bioprospecting, you can call it as exploring molecular, genetic, and species level diversity for economic value. That is bioprospecting. In tropical forest, still large number of plants are undiscovered. In tropical forest में large number of plants are undiscovered and have medicinal value, और उनकी they are having medicinal value. So tropical forest में okay, large number of plants are undiscovered, and in tropical forest it means that they are having huge medicinal value, बहुत ज़्यादा है. तो still plants as a medicinal resource, still this is a huge topic, and a lot of research is going on in this field. Second cause for protecting the biodiversity is broad utilitarian uses. So broad utilitarian uses means we are talking about the what you can say, the indirect benefits which we are getting from the nature. So we are getting many indirect benefits in the form of different products and in the form of different services which we are getting from the ecosystem. And can we call those services as ecosystem services? Yes, we can call them as ecosystem services. So when we talk about the broad utilitarian uses of biodiversity, we are talking about the ecosystem services की हम बात करते हैं. तो क्या क्या हो सकती हैं, कुछ एग्जांपल हम यहाँ पे देते हैं, ये भी बहुत सारी हो सकती हैं. ऑक्सीजन विच वी आर गेटिंग, यस वी आर गेटिंग फ्रॉम द प्लांट्स ऑक्सीजन. नाउ थिंक अबाउट द कॉस्ट ऑफ द ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर and the oxygen which we are getting free of cost from the nature, right? So if you give a price tag to this service, the value will be very, very huge in terms of money. So oxygen, yes, we are getting from nature. Then pollination, there are many pollinators. Pollination, as a result of the pollination, fruits and seeds we are getting for food, we are eating them. So pollination, we can compare the cost with the artificial pollination से compare कर सकते हैं हम लोग. Even Robert Constanja, one of the American ecologists, he has calculated these ecosystem services, and many years back, I think he got 33 trillion US dollars का उन्होंने estimate दिया था जो हम ये services nature हमें दे रहा है, 33 trillion US dollars. And if we keep the inflation now, so this value will be quite huge. Then the third service is aesthetic pleasure which we are getting. Aesthetic pleasure, we can call it as intangible item, कह सकते हैं हम लोग. the pleasure which you are getting after seeing blooming of flowers, birds singing, nature walk, etc., etc. So that is also having some value in terms of economic terms. So उसकी value है. So these are the various broad utilitarian uses for which we need to protect the biodiversity. We need to conserve the biodiversity. Third reason, we'll talk about the ethical reasons. For ethical reasons, we know that the all living organisms, microbes, plants, animals, they are living with us on earth. So they are having a right to exist, a right to live. This. And we, as a human being, we do not have any right to kill them, right? So they are also the equal partner with us, we can say that. So right to existence, this is a ethical you can say cause. ये हमारा ethics है और ethics को maintain करना बहुत important है. Many species in our ecosystem, they may not have economic value, what they may have intrinsic value to exist, and we do not have any right to over-exploit any species. We do not have any right to kill any species because nature has created them. Okay, so next we will talk about how we conserve biodiversity. So we know that conservation of biodiversity is very, very important. But the question arises, how we can conserve biodiversity? को हम conserve कैसे कर सकते हैं? That is the important question. So for conserving biodiversity, we may have two approaches. Yes. कौन-कौन सी approaches हो सकती हैं हमारे पास? In situ conservation, first approach. In situ conservation and ex-situ conservation. Ex-situ conservation. These are the two approaches, in situ and ex-situ conservation. So in situ conservation, when we talk about, the conservation is done in the natural habitat, and as we know that there is always conflict between conservation and development, because many of the developmental activities may cause the loss of biodiversity, and if we want to conserve the species like tiger, we need to conserve the entire forest. कंजर्वेशन के लिए हमें पूरे फॉरेस्ट को कंजर्व करना पड़ेगा. एंड इन situ conservation is done in such cases where no urgent need of conservation is required, and resources are limited for conservation in case of mass extinction. Resources are limited for conservation in mass extinction. Now we talk about the in situ conservation methods की बात करते हैं. So we can talk about hotspots, protected areas, and sacred groups. What are the hotspots? Hotspots क्या हैं? Hotspots, they are the biodiversity rich areas. They are having high degree of endemism, यानी कि वहाँ पे local species बहुत ज़्यादा पाई जाती हैं. Rate of extinction is also very high in the hotspots. Initially there were 25 recognized hotspots थे. Later on 9 were added, so total there are 34 hotspots on Earth. Earth के ऊपर total number of hotspots जो है that is 34 is the number. If we talk about the hotspots, then if we are able to conserve the species at hotspots, if we are able to conserve the biodiversity at the hotspots, we can reduce the rate of mass extinction by 30%. This 30% is very huge data. अगर हम hotspots को कंजर्व कर लेते हैं, वहाँ पे स्पीसीज़ को कंजर्व कर लेते हैं, तो रेट ऑफ मास एक्सटेंशन जो है जो 30% तक हम रिड्यूस कर सकते हैं. The hotspots, they cover less than 2% of land area. Less than 2% of land area hotspots cover करते हैं. And if we talk about the 3 major hotspots of India, then they are Western Ghat and Sri Lanka, number 1. Himalayan areas, number 2. And third is the Indo-Burma area. Indo-Burma area, तीसरा. 3 hotspots हैं, Western Ghat, Himalayan areas and Indo-Burma areas. These are the 3 hotspots which are present in India. Indo-Burma areas. Now we'll talk about the protected areas. Protected areas क्या हैं? These are the areas which are protected by law. And in these protected areas, we may talk about the wildlife sanctuaries, which are 448, national park, which are 19 number, and biosphere reserve, which are 14 in number. So first we'll talk about wildlife sanctuaries. Wildlife sanctuary. Wildlife sanctuaries, as we said, there are 448 इनका number है. And here the grazing is allowed, human settlement is also allowed, forest product can be collected, plants and animal species का यहाँ पे protection दोनों का होता है. लेकिन as we said, grazing, human settlement, forest product collection is allowed in these wildlife sanctuaries. So as we said, plant and animal species protection is done in the wildlife sanctuaries में दोनों का protection होता है. Forest products, indeed, they are very, very important, and if forest product collection is allowed, so we are involving the participation of the local people because we are giving them some benefits, so they will also be involved in the protection of these areas. National park. Now there are 90 national park, and in national park we know that the grazing and human settlement is not allowed. In the national park में grazing और human settlement allow नहीं होता है. And many national parks, they are upgraded from the wildlife sanctuaries. बहुत सारे नेशनल पार्क अपग्रेड हुए हैं वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरीज से. एंड व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट द नेशनल पार्क्स, देन वी कैन से दैट दे आर मोर एनिमल स्पीसीज स्पेसिफिक. यहाँ पे एनिमल स्पीसीज़ का कंजर्वेशन जो है वो ज़्यादा होता है नेशनल पार्क के अंदर. सो नेशनल पार्क्स आर मोर एनिमल स्पीसीज स्पेसिफिक. फॉर द कंजर्वेशन ऑफ द एनिमल स्पीसीज, नेशनल पार्क्स आर मोर डिवोटेड. सो दे आर ऑल्सो वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट they play for the conservation of the species. Next we can talk about the biosphere reserves. Biosphere reserves, What are biosphere reserves? They are the large areas, and large areas, when we say, then even boundaries are more than one state. They are such large areas. बाउंड्रीज एक से ज़्यादा स्टेट्स में हो सकती हैं, इतने बड़े एरियाज़ हैं ये. सो डिफरेंट इंटरस्टेट में हो सकती हैं. देयर आर 14 बायोस्फीयर रिजर्व्स. सो इन बायोस्फीयर रिजर्व देयर इज़ द इनर कोर एरिया which is having dense forest. Then outside to this inner core area there will be the buffer zone. This buffer zone, here the limited activities pertaining to the research and studies, they may be allowed in the buffer area. So very restricted activities with respect to research and studies can be allowed in the buffer zone. And then outside to the buffer zone, the outer area, the peripheral area is there, and this outer area, peripheral area, there human intervention is allowed in this area. So outer area में human intervention जो होता है वो allow होता है. So this is the outer or peripheral area, we can say this is the outside area. Now next method of conservation, sacred groves. Sacred groves or sacred grounds, ये क्या होते हैं? These are the forest tracts or patches of the forest which are kept for the protection of the wildlife sanctuaries, or we can say that sacred groves or sacred grounds, these are protected areas by the tribes, and here they will worship these areas, and here the biodiversity will be conserved. So their faith is associated with those areas. If we talk about the examples, Garo, Khasi, Jaintia hills in Meghalaya, these are the famous sacred groves हैं ये. Garo, Khasi, Jaintia hills, very famous, मेघालय के अंदर हैं ये. Then we can talk about the Aravali hills in Rajasthan. Aravali hills हैं राजस्थान में. Aravali hills in Rajasthan, these are the areas. And Chanda, Bastar, Sarguja, they are in Western Ghats of Madhya Pradesh. Chanda, Bastar, Sarguja, Western Ghat of Madhya Pradesh, sacred groves. Now it is said that the sacred groves is the last resort. Sacred grove is the last resort for protection of biodiversity in Meghalaya. Sacred groves क्या हैं? ये last resort हैं बायोडाइवर्सिटी की प्रोटेक्शन के लिए मेघालय जैसी स्टेट्स के अंदर. Sacred groves is the last resort for the protection of biodiversity, in Meghalaya like states, in Meghalaya. Now we will talk about ex-situ conservation methods. So when we say ex-situ conservation, what is ex-situ conservation? It is off-site conservation. ये off-site conservation है, means the conservation which is done in the protected areas, conservation which is done in the human intervention, that is ex-situ conservation. So any organism which we are going to conserve away from its habitat, under the human supervision, under the human protection, that is ex-situ conservation. Ex-situ conservation के बहुत सारे examples हो सकते हैं. You may have visited many places as well. Examples ex-situ conservation के हम देखेंगे zoological park, zoo जिसको हम बोलते हैं. Zoological parks, yes, they are the best examples, and many of us have visited these places. Then wildlife safari park, ex-situ conservation किया जाता है. Botanical gardens, जैसे NBRI लखनऊ is a famous botanical garden where the many species are protected. Cryopreservation is a technique where we are going to preserve the cells in ultra low temperature, that is minus 196 degrees Celsius in liquid nitrogen. And pollen banks, pollen grain को भी हम store करके रखते हैं. So this is all about the conservation method. Now let us take a quick review of international efforts for the biodiversity conservation के लिए क्या क्या efforts हुए हैं. Few examples has been given in our NCERT for the conservation. First, 1992, Rio, which is in Brazil, the Earth Summit was held. It is also known as the Rio Summit. And this summit was for the conservation of biodiversity and sustainable development. In today's time, we are talking about sustainable development which is being done not causing any major harm to the ecosystem. That is sustainable development. जो रिसोर्सेज हैं हमारे वो फ्यूचर जनरेशन के लिए प्रोटेक्ट रहें, एनवायरनमेंट को हम ज़्यादा नुकसान ना करें, लेकिन डेवलपमेंटल एक्टिविटीज़ भी साथ साथ में हों. दैट इज़ द मीनिंग ऑफ द सस्टेनेबल development. So we need to have a very balanced approach for the development, because many times when we are doing the development तो इकोसिस्टम जो है उस एरिया का डिग्रेड होता है. तो उस इकोसिस्टम को डिग्रेड होने से बचाने के लिए हमें ऐसी टेक्निक्स यूज़ करनी पड़ेंगी ताकि हमारा इकोसिस्टम प्रोटेक्ट रहे. So this conference was, Earth Summit was regarding this only. Then in 2002, Johannesburg, which is in South Africa, World Summit was held, and this World Summit, the aim was to decrease in rate of biodiversity loss at global, local and regional level. इन तीनों लेवल के ऊपर हमें बायोडाइवर्सिटी का जो लॉस हो रहा है उस लॉस को हमें डिक्रीज़ करना है, बिकॉज द बायोडाइवर्सिटी लॉस इज़ अ मेजर कंसर्न at regional, at local and at global area. So what are the different ways and methods which can be adopted so that we can conserve the biodiversity? So this was about the World Summit which was held in 2002 in Johannesburg in South Africa. So this is all about this chapter. So please वीडियो को लाइक कीजिएगा, सब्सक्राइब कीजिएगा चैनल को और शेयर कर दीजिएगा वीडियो को. ये पार्ट सेकंड हमने इसका फिनिश किया है. सो कीप ऑन ग्रोइंग, कीप ऑन लर्निंग. मिलते हैं ऐसे ही वीडियो में. वेट कीजिएगा नेक्स्ट वीडियो का. थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग. थैंक यू सो मच.